There's a reason I don't talk about the good things that happen to me. It's not that I'm ungrateful. I've just learned, sometimes the hard way, that sharing a win in my family is like dangling fresh meat in front of wild dogs. They don't celebrate with you. They circle. They calculate. Living in San Diego, where everything costs more than it should, I've found peace in solitude. I enjoy quiet. I enjoy stability. I've also learned that being alone doesn't mean I'm lacking. It just means I don't owe anyone anything. My father used to say, if you don't use it, someone else will. When I was younger, I thought he was referring to garden tools or leftovers in the fridge. But as I got older, I started to understand what he really meant. It was about space, ownership, and control. And apparently, that philosophy didn't just apply to things, it applied to people too. I still remember the weight of the key in my hand. Silver, polished, heavier than I expected. I sat across from my boss, blinking like he'd just handed me a live grenade. A full $1 million unit in Little Italy, he said, sliding the sleek black folder toward me. No strings, just gratitude. You've built half this company's future. It's time you owned a part of yours. I laughed, nervously. Sir, I don't think I can accept this. He raised a brow. Verdell, don't you dare argue with gratitude. You've earned this 10 times over. I opened the folder and stared at the paperwork. My name, in bold letters. Not a cosigner, not a shared title. Mine. The drive home blurred. The lights of the freeway, the rhythm of the tires, the quiet hum of my old Subaru. All of it wrapped around my disbelief. I didn't blast music. I didn't call anyone. I just breathed. Slowly, carefully, like the universe might take it back if I moved too fast. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I still hadn't smiled. The next morning, I stood in the empty apartment, hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of new paint. The sunlight hit just right through the balcony glass. I whispered, "You did it. Not for anyone else, just for me." And then I didn't tell a soul. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not even Corinne, my best friend since college who once kept my engagement a secret for 6 months. I'd learned, through years of selective silence, that some things are safer when they stay yours. In my family, private victories had a way of becoming communal resources. When I got a bonus once, Mom suggested I pay off my sister's credit card debt because you don't really have much going on anyway. When I won a local leadership award, my name was never mentioned at the family barbecue, but Marzella got a whole toast for buying new curtains. So this time, I wanted something just mine. I even laughed to myself one night. My silence is the safest lock I've ever owned. 2 weeks passed. We had a family gathering at my parents' house. Nothing major, just a Sunday dinner. Mom had made her signature chicken and rice, and Dad was already half asleep in his recliner before dessert. I stayed quiet most of the evening, avoiding questions, half listening to Marzella talk about floral arrangements for her wedding. Just as I was getting up to leave, Mom tilted her head. "Oh, I almost forgot. I saw your name in your company's newsletter. Something about a condo?" My breath caught. I turned slowly. Newsletter? Her smile was tight, practiced. "Yes, someone forwarded it to me. How exciting. A place in Little Italy, right?" I nodded once, too fast. "It's just a work thing." She sipped her wine. "Well, congrats. That area is expensive, isn't it?" I said nothing. My mouth had gone dry. I didn't ask how she got it. I didn't ask who sent it. But in my gut, I knew the circle had begun. That night, I got the text. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "Don't worry, I have a great idea for it." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I locked my phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. I should have known she'd find out eventually. My family has a way of sniffing out what doesn't belong to them yet. And if she already had a great idea, there was no doubt in my mind it involved Marzella. The next day, I visited the apartment again. Alone. The floors were still pristine. The air still held that hint of paint and fresh drywall. I wiped down the counters, checked the windows, walked the space like I was memorizing every corner, every inch that was legally mine. I stood on the balcony, staring down at the street below, letting the sounds of the city wash over me. Car horns, distant laughter, someone yelling about tacos on a corner cart. I thought about the phrase that stuck with me most these past few years. Something Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I believed her. And now I needed to believe myself too. Because this time, I wasn't going to be the one who blinked first. The rooftop was strung with golden lights, casting a warm glow over polished tables and champagne flutes lined like soldiers waiting for celebration. I stood alone near the edge, pretending to admire the downtown skyline of San Diego, though my eyes kept darting to the far end of the garden where my mother held court like she was hosting a gala, not her daughter's wedding. I wasn't part of the bridal party. Not a bridesmaid, not in the rehearsal, not even asked to help with place cards or decorations, which, to be fair, was a first. I had been quietly relieved to sit this one out. But being reduced to a guest, a seat filler among distant cousins and college friends of the groom, made me realize how easily I could be pushed to the perimeter of my own family. People kept approaching my mother to thank her. "You're so generous, Liana," said one. "That's an incredible gift." "They're so lucky." I sipped from my flute of flat Prosecco, trying not to let it show that I had no idea what they were talking about. A gift? I didn't ask. I just kept my head low and my mouth shut, something I'd learned to do in rooms where I wasn't given a script. I watched Marcella glide through the crowd in her pearl-beaded gown like she'd been cast for the role. She was perfect for this kind of event. Bubbly, practiced, always camera-ready. I, on the other hand, was dressed in an understated navy wrap dress that blended with the dusk. The bride waved, and I lifted my glass. She didn't approach, didn't stop, just moved on to the next circle of admiration. The clinking of silverware against glass called for attention. My father walked toward the microphone with the pride of a man unveiling a monument. He cleared his throat, smiled wide, and began, "Thank you all for being here to celebrate the beginning of something truly special. Marcella has always been our star, our heartbeat, and seeing her begin this next chapter with someone as steady and kind as Jeremy, it fills us with joy." Applause. I clapped once, twice, my smile tight. He continued, "As parents, we do what we can to set our children up for success, to give them tools for stability, for a foundation." There was a pause. My stomach turned before the words even left his mouth. "To help the newlyweds start fresh, we're gifting them the new apartment in Little Italy, a legacy home for the next chapter." I didn't hear the applause that followed. My ears rang. My hands went cold. The glass I held slipped slightly in my grip, clinking against the table. I didn't drop it, but the sound was loud enough to make a few heads turn. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. Time had slowed to a molasses crawl, trapping me in this moment of surreal betrayal. The apartment, my apartment, the one I'd bled for, sweated over. The one with my name on every line of the deed. I slipped out from the table and headed toward the balcony. I needed air, space, something that wasn't laced with lies. Outside, the breeze was cooler. I leaned against the railing, heart pounding. I couldn't process it, not yet. I just stood there, clutching the metal rail, trying to remember how to breathe. A voice came from behind me. My cousin, Angela. "Hey," she said gently. "You must feel so proud. That place is stunning. I had no idea your parents were giving it to them." I turned slowly. Neither did I. She tilted her head, confused. "Wait, what?" I offered a thin smile. "Enjoy the party." Back inside, I replayed every detail from the past week. My mother's casual text, the emoji-laced, "I have a great idea for it." I had assumed she meant renting it out, maybe suggesting someone she knew could use it for a few months. Never in my wildest assumptions did I think she meant it would be a wedding present, a gift. Publicly announced, like it had always been hers to give, I stayed long enough to be polite, long enough to avoid questions. As soon as dessert was served, I slipped away and made my way back to the venue's main building. The cleanup crew had already begun clearing the private gift room. I waited for them to finish gathering trays and tablecloths before quietly stepping inside. The space smelled of roses and wax. On a side table, I found what I didn't even know I was looking for, A stack of invitations. Not the digital versions I'd seen posted online, but printed ones, gold embossed, thick cardstock, and there it was. A small map insert with a bold heading. Home Sweet Home. The address? My address. My unit number. My hands shook slightly as I turned the card over. Near the table was a standing poster board, half covered with wrapping paper. Curiosity got the better of me. I peeled the paper back slowly, and there it was, an enlarged engagement photo of Marzella and Jeremy standing in front of my building, the front steps, the unit door, taken before I even had the keys. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a last-minute idea. This was coordinated, planned, executed weeks ago, maybe even before the deed was finalized. I whispered, "They expected me to stay quiet." Again. The words were sour on my tongue, but they felt true, familiar. The ride home was silent. My car headlights carved through the night as my thoughts unraveled faster than I could gather them. My jaw clenched. My fingers gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, I didn't know whether I wanted to cry or scream. Instead, I turned on my laptop. I needed to know what else had been said. I searched quickly, typing in keywords that connected the wedding, the venue, and the gift. A few clicks in, I found it, a short feature from a local wedding blog highlighting San Diego's sweetest spring ceremony. I scrolled past the flowery intro, the vendor credits, the dress details. There it was. The couple will be moving into a family-owned condo in Little Italy as their first home. A generous gift from the bride's parents, celebrating not just a marriage, but a new beginning. Not a word about me, not a mention of the paperwork, the title, the bank drafts, my signature, my sacrifices. I closed the tab. I stood, walked into the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. Eyes red, face blank, breath shallow. I said aloud, "I signed that deed. I paid those taxes. I bled for that place." And just like that, they moved in, and no one thought to ask me. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a headache that had nothing to do with champagne. My body ached like I'd run a marathon, but all I'd done was sit at a table and pretend not to hear my name erased from my own story. The apartment, the one I hadn't even spent a night in, was no longer just mine, at least not in their eyes. I sat in bed longer than usual, thinking about all the times I'd chosen to keep quiet. All the moments in my life when I could have spoken up but didn't. I wasn't raised to confront. I was raised to keep the peace. Growing up, I was always the one with the checklist. The one with the clipboard at Marzella's high school events. The one arranging centerpieces, ironing gowns, booking catering. When she got into college, I threw her a graduation party and paid for most of it myself. She didn't thank me. My mother did, by telling people how selfless I was, like being invisible was some kind of spiritual achievement. "You're so dependable," she used to say. "It's like you were born to support others." Funny how that never felt like a compliment. At some point, I started mistaking usefulness for love. If I was always needed, maybe they'd remember to see me. But they didn't. Not really. I wasn't the daughter who needed celebrating. I was the one who made the celebration happen. So when my father made that toast at the wedding, when he handed over my apartment like it was a serving platter of hors d'oeuvres, I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I simply left. That's what I was trained to do. Absorb, adjust, disappear quietly so others could shine. But that morning, I needed to see it for myself. I threw on jeans and a hoodie, drove down to the condo, and parked in the alley behind the building to avoid questions. The elevator ride up was short but suffocating. My key still worked. Barely. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air had changed. There were boxes, white, neatly labeled Mr. Mrs. Evans. A monogrammed rug lay across the entryway. The coffee table had been replaced, and on the kitchen counter sat a framed wedding photo of Marzella and her husband, both glowing, both smiling, standing in front of the building I thought I owned. I walked through the apartment like I was touring a museum. My hand brushed along the edge of the kitchen island, the one I'd scrubbed clean the day I got the keys. The paint on the living room wall was still the same color I'd chosen after spending 3 weekends in hardware stores comparing swatches. My couch was gone. My artwork still hung, but the energy was foreign. It no longer felt like my space. I walked into the bedroom and stood in the doorway. The bed had been made, crisp sheets, 2 pillows, a vase of white lilies on the nightstand, my nightstand. I opened the closet, her shoes, his shirts, and I hadn't even unpacked my toothbrush. This wasn't a gift. It was a transfer, and I had been the courier. I left without touching anything else. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel and stared through the windshield. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat there and remembered the first time I'd ever seen that building. I was 29, fresh off a service call to repair an HVAC unit in the financial district. I'd stopped at a food truck, holding a dripping carne asada taco in one hand and my phone in the other. The building caught my eye. Sleek, modern, not flashy, just grounded. The kind of place you saw in TV shows about people who got promoted. The kind of place that didn't feel like a temporary stop. I remember thinking, one day. That one day became a compass. Every dollar I didn't spend, every party I skipped, every extra project I volunteered for, it all pointed toward that building. I never wanted a penthouse or a beachfront villa. I wanted a door that locked behind me. I wanted a place where I didn't have to negotiate my right to exist. Ownership, to me, meant not having to explain myself. Ownership isn't about things, I once wrote in a notebook. It's about not being at someone's mercy. My boss understood that. When he handed me those keys, he wasn't giving me a building. He was acknowledging something no one else had. I mattered. I wanted you to feel seen, he said. But the irony was cruel, because while someone outside my bloodline had seen me, the people who raised me had rewritten the story before I even got a chance to live in it. I didn't drive home right away. I stopped by a park and sat on a bench under a jacaranda tree. I pulled out my journal from my bag, flipped to the next blank page, and began to write. If they took it from me, they must believe I don't know how to take it back. I stared at the sentence. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I took out the deed, folded carefully in my notebook. My name was still on it, not Marzella's, not Liana's, not anyone else's, not yet, because I knew them. I knew their rhythm. There would be an LLC, some kind of trust maneuver, a subtle filing, a quiet trip to a family attorney who owed Dad a favor. They would wait for me to say nothing. They would take my silence as consent. So I set a timer, 30 days. I marked it on my calendar, not as fight day, but as reset. If they thought I was weak, let them. If they thought I would bend again, let them believe it. Let them be surprised when the wall they always leaned on finally pushed back. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, my real kitchen, not the one I could no longer walk into without asking, I got an email notification. Subject, Notice of Ownership Verification Request. Sender, San Diego County Property Records Office. My heart jumped. I opened it. Dear Ms. Verdell Evans, we have received a request to verify and potentially update the ownership information on the following property. My property. And I hadn't sent that request. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I said out loud to no one, they're already trying to move the deed, and they didn't even bother to tell me. The plan was simple. Go to the apartment, gather my things, and reclaim the air inside those walls. I hadn't been back since the wedding, not since the moment my father's toast sliced through my name like it never existed. The silence that followed, the sting, it had taken days to sort through the mess in my head. But I was ready. I was going to walk back into my space and remind myself that it was still mine. But when I reached the building, nothing felt familiar. Not the lobby, not the elevator music, not even the rhythm of the hallway. I pulled out my keys, expecting the same subtle click and swing of the door. Instead, the key jammed. I tried again, twice. It was pointless. The lock had been changed. I knocked. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. Marzella stood there in a white bathrobe, her wet hair wrapped in a towel, a ceramic mug in her hand. "Oh, hey," she said like I'd stopped by to borrow sugar. No surprise, no guilt. Just the kind of breezy confidence that came with never being told no. She stepped aside. "Come in. Just in time. Jeremy's out running errands." I walked in slowly, my eyes catching every detail that felt wrong. Boxes, hers, already unpacked. A framed wedding photo hanging by the entry. The living room arranged like a furniture catalog. My throw blanket was gone. My rug had been rolled and replaced. The kitchen gleamed with new utensils and mugs that said things like wifey and hubs. The couch had throw pillows with their initials embroidered in gold. My name was nowhere. I didn't speak. I wasn't sure I could. The weight of her presence in my home, our supposed home, sat on my chest like a stone. She plopped onto the couch and took a sip of tea. "So, Mom said you were cool with it," she began. "I mean, you didn't say anything, right?" I didn't move. "When exactly was this decided?" She shrugged. "Before the wedding, honestly. We figured you weren't really using it. And come on, you're single. You don't really need a whole two-bedroom place, do you?" The words hit like a slap. Smiling, casual, well-rehearsed slaps. "I guess the paperwork disagrees," I said, voice calm but clipped. She laughed, setting her mug down. "You've always been the flexible one. That's what I admire about you. You don't make things complicated." "I'm not complicated," I replied. "I'm clear. And this, what you're doing, isn't clarity. It's theft." She flinched, just slightly, then quickly masked it. "Verdell, you said it yourself once. You're good at being alone. And honestly, we need the space more than you do." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth felt too dry, my stomach too hollow. Instead, I turned and walked out. I held it together until I reached my car. The moment I closed the door and the engine hummed beneath me, the dam broke. Tears came fast. My hand trembled against the steering wheel. The humiliation of it all, the brazen entitlement, the way they made decisions around me like I was a decorative plant, consumed every corner of my body. "This is not happening," I whispered. "This is not happening." But it was. It had. And it wasn't the first time. Birthday parties where my name wasn't on the cake. Talent shows where I choreographed routines but stood off stage while Marcella soaked up applause. Report cards my parents forgot to open while they framed hers. I'd trained myself to smile through it all, because if I didn't, I was told I was bitter, difficult, ungrateful. But in that moment, sitting in my car outside the home I'd earned, I didn't feel ungrateful. I felt gutted. Why does being strong always mean I have to lose? I asked the windshield, as if it could answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I grabbed my phone and called Mariah, my old college roommate. We hadn't talked much since she moved to Colorado with her partner, but something in me knew she'd understand. She answered after 2 rings. "Verdell?" I didn't even say hello. "They moved in, changed the locks, acted like it was normal." A pause. "Tell me you're joking." I laughed, a bitter exhale. "I wish." She let out a sigh. "Jesus, that's not a misunderstanding. That's theft in slow motion. Mom said I didn't need that much space, because I'm single." Mariah was quiet for a beat. Then, "You know what's worse than betrayal? Betrayal dressed up as logic. They don't think you'll push back." "They're right," I whispered. "No, they're not. You just act like it because you've had to survive that way. But Verdell, you are not powerless. You just got good at hiding your strength." We stayed on the phone for nearly an hour, talking through every possibility. Legal, personal, emotional. By the time I hung up, something inside me had clicked back into place. A switch. A resolve. I pulled my laptop onto the bed and opened the folder labeled Condos Deeds. There it was, the original PDF. My signature, my down payment record, the tax prep file, every document confirming what I already knew deep down but needed to see in black and white. This wasn't just mine legally, it was mine morally. The next morning, I woke up to a ping, a text from my mother. "Family dinner at our place tonight. Let's talk through this misunderstanding. I'm sure you'll see we only want the best for everyone." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. A misunderstanding. That's what she called it. I didn't respond right away. I made coffee. I sat by the window. I listened to the quiet. Then I replied, "I'll bring the paperwork." I pulled up to my parents' house just as the sun dipped below the line of palm trees along their street, casting a soft orange hue over the cracked sidewalk and that same flickering porch light that had never been fixed. Nothing about the place had changed. Same chipped mailbox, same dent on the garage door from the time Dad misjudged the driveway turn. And yet, as I sat there with the folder clutched in my lap, my folder, my deed, everything inside me said this wasn't home anymore. I walked up the steps slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked against the tiles, the sound too loud in the early evening quiet. I rang the bell out of formality. I knew my mother was watching through the blinds before the door even opened. "Verdell," she greeted me with a smile just a shade too bright, too rehearsed. "You look lovely." I smiled, thinly. "Thanks." She leaned in for a hug. I shifted slightly, letting it be brief. My arms stiffened around the folder, the edge pressing into my ribs. Inside, the house was just as it always had been. The scent of lemon chicken drifted from the kitchen, the sound of TV chatter low in the background. Marzella's laughter rang from the dining room. My father chuckled at something she said, a sound that once made me feel safe but now echoed like a stranger's. They've prepared the setting, I thought. I've prepared the truth. The table was set for 5. Candles lit, linen napkins folded into fans. I took my seat at the far end, away from the head of the table where my mother always sat. Marzella beamed. "We haven't done this in so long. Feels like a real family night." I didn't respond. I placed the folder beside my plate, untouched. Dinner started like any other, passing dishes, small talk, laughter that didn't quite reach the corners of my mouth. I didn't touch my food. My mother kept looking at me, then at the folder. The chicken smelled like memories I didn't want anymore. Halfway through the meal, my mother finally cleared her throat. "Verdell, we just think it's best to talk openly, as a family." That word, "we," lit something in my chest. It wasn't just about inclusion. It was code for collusion. "We" always meant, not you. My father set down his fork. "Your sister's lease ended, and this was the logical step. The condo was empty, and we figured—" Marzella cut in. "Besides, it's not like you were living there." I looked at her. "Because I didn't even have the keys long enough to put my toothbrush down." Her lips pursed. My father reached for his wine. My mother stayed quiet. I reached over, picked up the folder, and slid it onto the table. Slowly, deliberately. "I brought this," I said, "because I figured we'd stop pretending tonight." My father opened the folder with one hand, glanced at the first page. "This. It's just a placeholder. I had a friend draft an internal transfer to keep the property in the family LLC." I leaned forward. "Then explain this." I flipped to the second page. "The signature here, that's not mine." Silence. My mother reached for her napkin, dabbing an imaginary spot on her lips. Marzella stared at the table. I pressed again. "You didn't think I'd notice?" Marzella finally spoke. "We were going to tell you. It just got busy with the wedding." Her voice was small, rehearsed. A girl caught in the middle, except she wasn't in the middle, she was at the center. I stared at the signature, curved in the same way her old birthday cards to me had been. It hit me like a slap across the face. "You forged my name," I said, quietly, calmly. Marzella's eyes widened. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother still didn't look up. I sat back in my chair and let the words hang in the air. "I thought we were a family," I said. "But what kind of family takes from you and calls it generosity?" No one answered. And just like that, I was back in high school again, working late to finish a science project while Marzella skipped studying to go shopping. I'd earned a full-ride scholarship to NYU. I remember the envelope, the thrill in my chest when I opened it. My mother had taken it. She said we'd talk about it as a family. Then one day, it was gone. When I asked, she said, "Your sister needed a chance to get away. We submitted her name instead." She got in, dropped out after 1 semester. I stayed home, took on 2 jobs, and paid for community college. "It's all in the family," they said then. And again now. The phrase sat like ash in my mouth. "You didn't just steal my space," I said slowly. "You've been rewriting my life for years." I stood up. My napkin slid from my lap to the floor. No one moved to pick it up. "You want to talk like a family?" I asked. Then start by admitting what you've done. Until then, I'm not negotiating with thieves. My mother's voice was sharp. Verdell, don't you dare walk away like this. I turned, folder in hand, shoulders squared. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm walking toward what's mine. 2 days after the dinner, I sat in my apartment, my real one, the small rental I hadn't even wanted to keep, and stared at my laptop screen like it might bite me. The county property website loaded slower than usual, the buffer icon spinning as if it already knew what I was about to see. When the page finally opened, my chest tightened. There it was, in black and white. A new entry under ownership changes. Status, pending. But what hit harder than the word itself was the detail underneath. Joint holder, Marzella Evans, listed as co-trustee. I blinked. Then I leaned forward and reread it. 3 times. Still there. No trust had been created. Not by me. No permission granted. I hadn't signed anything, hadn't authorized anyone to touch that title. And yet somehow she was now tethered to what I'd built. A low gasp escaped my throat before I even realized I was breathing that shallow. The cursor hovered as if waiting for me to do something, but I just sat there, frozen, heart pounding. The betrayal wasn't even subtle anymore. It was logged, tracked, filed under bureaucracy. They moved while I was still eating their dinner, I whispered. It was time. I grabbed my keys, stuffed the folder with the deed back into my bag, and drove straight to downtown. I didn't need advice from friends. I needed a lawyer. The receptionist at the firm looked up. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, steadying my voice. But I have a problem with a deed, and a sister who thinks forgery is a love language. That got me in. The lawyer, a composed woman named Layla, sat across from me in a glass office that smelled of eucalyptus and control. She reviewed the documents I slid across the table and didn't flinch. Did you sign anything giving them access to your title? No. Any verbal agreement? Email? Consent in writing? No. They did it behind my back. She nodded slowly. Then they committed fraud. That word, fraud, settled over me like armor. Cold but protective. She continued, this is textbook manipulation of property ownership. If they used falsified documents, that's a felony. And if they altered ownership through a false trust designation, we'll need to act fast before the transaction finalizes. I sat still, fingers digging into my palms beneath the table. I'm going to file a quiet title action on your behalf, she said. It's a lawsuit used to establish rightful ownership. But you'll need to serve them papers within 30 days. If we let it sit longer, they could solidify their position through legal technicalities. Can I tell them I'm filing? She shook her head. Absolutely not. Let them think you're doing nothing. The more confident they are, the sloppier they get. I left the office an hour later with a timeline and a plan. The walk back to my car felt different. No longer aimless, I had direction again, even if it was toward a fight. That night, I began my own investigation. I started with the easy things, emails, texts, any correspondence that could prove I never agreed to share ownership. Then I pulled out the physical deed and scanned every inch. The wedding invitations I'd found tucked under the gift table, those too. I photographed the map that listed the apartment address, added it to a folder named Proof. The next day, I called the locksmith company that had installed the original digital locks, asked for a log of the key change entries. Ma'am, the man said, we show the digital lock was reprogrammed 4 days before the wedding. My grip on the phone tightened. And who authorized it? The request came from a third party. Family name matched the property, paid in full by credit card. Sorry, we can't disclose the full card holder name unless subpoenaed. Understood. I hung up. And then I called the building's management office. It took a bit more convincing, but after verifying I was the listed legal owner and hinting at a legal inquiry, they gave me limited access to security footage from the week before the wedding. What I found made my hands go numb. Footage of my parents unloading boxes, carting in furniture, laughing with Marzella and Jeremy 2 days before their wedding. They weren't just moving in, they were celebrating, smiling, waving at the camera like it was all a done deal. They planned the theft like a celebration, I muttered, dragging the footage into the folder marked Verdell's ownership, do not touch. On my way out of the building, Angela, the front desk receptionist who'd been working there since the beginning, flagged me down. Verdell, she said quietly, looking around. Can I talk to you for a sec? I nodded, already bracing for whatever was next. She leaned in slightly. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I overheard something. Your sister was talking to her husband last week. She said she's not going to do anything. She never has. I felt my pulse thud at the base of my throat. She said what? Angela nodded. Just thought you should know. You deserve better. I thanked her and stepped back into the elevator. My thoughts didn't race. They aligned. They think my silence is surrender. This time, it's strategy. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once signed my first job offer letter, where I'd cried after my grandmother's funeral, where I'd once celebrated landing the client that changed everything. I spread out the documents, the deed, the lock change request, the wedding map, the email from the property office, the building footage, Angela's verbal statement. I'd need her to write that if possible. And in the middle of it all, I placed a blank manila envelope. With Layla's help earlier that day, we'd drafted an official cease and desist letter. All that was left was to seal it. I slipped the letter into the envelope, pressed the adhesive shut, and used a Sharpie to write in capital letters, "To be served." I sat back, staring at the words. Next time they see me, I won't be holding dinner. I'll be holding consequences. The first ping came just after 6:30 a.m. I was halfway through making coffee, still bleary-eyed, when my phone started vibrating against the kitchen counter. Then again, and again. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Facebook tags, Instagram mentions, 2 voicemails. One from an aunt I hadn't spoken to since 2012. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked up the phone. The screen was glowing with Marzella's face, smiling wide under a caption that made my stomach turn. Blessed to move into our first home, thanks to the sacrifices of family. Some give without asking for anything in return. Underneath, hundreds of likes, comments piling on. So proud of your sister. True family love. Selfless siblings are God's gift. Even Uncle Ray, who lived 3 states away and never remembered my birthday, chimed in. What a powerful bond. So proud of the Evans girls. They had made me the hero of their fairy tale, without ever saying my name. The comments weren't for me. They were for the story they curated, polished, and posted like a Sunday sermon. And once again, I was being rewritten. This time for public consumption. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't scream. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table and scrolled through every word, every tag, every person who had swallowed the lie whole and asked for more. I had fought so hard to get out of the shadows, and now I was being used as the soft focus background to someone else's spotlight. It reminded me of something I hadn't thought about in years. When I was 23, I'd ended a serious relationship. The man I thought I would marry told me he needed someone more malleable. I came home, raw and shell-shocked. My mother handed me a cup of tea and said gently, "You've always been strong. You don't need someone to hold you." I swallowed that line like it was gospel. Let it shape me. It was meant as comfort, but it became a cage. That phrase, "you don't need," echoed through every decision they made for me. No party when I bought my car. No announcement when I earned my degree. No call when I got promoted. Because I didn't need it. I could survive without it. And survival was enough for them. They mistook my strength for dispensability. They always had. I drafted a response to the post. It wasn't angry, just factual. A list of events, the original deed, dates, timeline, silence, and a single line. You don't get to thank someone for a gift they never gave. But I didn't post it. Instead, I forwarded the draft to Layla, my attorney. Her response came quick. "Let them talk," she wrote. "It only strengthens our case. You want the public record on your side, not just online validation." I stared at the blinking cursor, then deleted the draft entirely. No more emotional labor. Instead, I sent a private message to someone who had once asked to interview me years ago, an independent real estate blogger with a reputation for cutting through the polished PR fluff. We'd met briefly during a leadership panel, traded business cards. I found her email and wrote, "Subject, A story no one's told yet. I sent everything: scans of the deed, photos from the move-in day, screenshots of Marzella's post, security footage stills, a full narrative, dates, names, receipts. Her reply came before lunch. This will hit hard when it drops. That night, I didn't toast to revenge. I opened my journal. I wrote, I was the one who fixed the leaks, filled the gaps, made room. The one who didn't cry when she should have. The one who didn't speak when she needed to. Because I was raised to believe that being strong meant being invisible. I paused, then added, but love without respect isn't love, it's use. And then, no more rewriting. My story, my voice. My name. I closed the journal. Exhaled. The next morning, just as the sun started warming the apartment's east wall, my phone vibrated again. The blogger had posted a teaser, a photo of a blurred wedding image, a quote about ownership versus optics. Caption, coming tomorrow. The truth behind the gifted condo story. Spoiler, it's not what you think. I didn't react, I didn't share it, I didn't comment, but within 10 minutes, the post had over 500 shares. Some thought it was about a local developer scandal. Others speculated it involved a celebrity. Meanwhile, my mother posted a photo of her garden. My sister posted a throwback from their honeymoon. Radio silence, except for the tremor under the surface that only the guilty recognize. I sipped my coffee, watched the comments swirl online. Let's see how loud they are, I whispered. When facts walk in. My phone rang just after 9, the number familiar even before the screen lit up. I hesitated. Part of me expected it, part of me hoped it wouldn't come. I let it ring once more before swiping to answer. Hello? My mother's voice came through, calm but void of the usual frosting. I heard there's a story going out tomorrow. I didn't answer immediately, let the silence stretch. You heard right. She didn't clear her throat, didn't fumble for words. I suggest you think about the family before letting it happen. I leaned back in the kitchen chair, glancing at the manila envelope still sitting on the counter, the one labeled to be served. Is that a threat? I asked. No, she replied. It's a reminder of who we are, of what matters. And what is that? I asked. She paused. Dignity, Marzella's image, your father's stress level. You know this doesn't help anyone. I looked out the window at the twilight sky. It helps me. You really want to humiliate your sister? I laughed, soft, empty. She wasn't humiliated when she forged my name. The pause on her end felt like a wall crashing. You've always been dramatic, Verdell. Maybe a public spectacle will teach you something about boundaries. I hung up. They weren't afraid when they took what was mine. But now they feared being seen. The next morning, the blogger posted a teaser on Instagram. A 20-second clip, a quick pan of the wedding venue, a shot of the condo exterior, the blurry silhouette of a woman, me, in a still frame that hung on screen just long enough to stir curiosity. A caption overlay, tomorrow's story will change how you think about family, generosity, and what it means to own your name. My phone buzzed nonstop. Is this you? Texts read. Wait, is that your sister's building? OMG, I thought she bought that place? Comments exploded below the post. Whose house is that really? Looks like someone's hiding something. Can't wait for the full story. I refreshed the feed. Again and again. Each scroll was a pulse of anxiety and justice, and something that tasted a lot like adrenaline. I received DMs from strangers, mostly women, saying they'd been erased in similar ways, and one from my college roommate, Mariah. Finally, the momentum was building. But I still couldn't shake the buzz in my chest, the mixture of anticipation and grief. Even when you're right, telling the truth comes at a price. That night, I couldn't sleep. I cleaned the kitchen twice, reorganized my silverware, watered a plant that didn't need it. I reread old journals, all of which showed a timeline of shrinking myself for other people's comfort. When dawn came, I made strong coffee and sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop. At 8:02 a.m., the story went live. Title: The 1mm gift that wasn't theirs to give. The piece was long, meticulous, and devastating in its precision. It opened with the context of the wedding speech, quoting my father's words about gifting the newlyweds a condo. Then, it introduced the contradiction: my name on the deed, my signature forged, my story rewritten. There were screenshots of ownership records, time-stamped photos from the move-in, footage from building security, a screenshot of Marzella's viral Facebook post, even an interview with me, my voice only, anonymous in name, but unmistakable in tone. The quote that hit hardest sat 3/4 down the article in bold. Verdell didn't lose a house. She was nearly erased from her own life. I sat still for several minutes after reading it, and then the comments came, thousands. This is why women stay silent. Because people treat their success as communal property. Marzella should be ashamed. Family values is not a license for theft. It trended within the hour. By noon, my phone had overheated. My email inbox filled with offers, talk shows, interviews, legal analysts wanting a quote. I ignored them all. Around 2 p.m., I received a new email. Subject: footage you should see, from someone who knows. It was from the blog's editor. Inside was a single video clip, sent anonymously. I clicked play. It was grainy, clearly filmed from a phone backstage at the wedding. Marzella stood with her back to the camera, adjusting her dress. She was talking to Jeremy, laughing. "She'll never fight us," she said. "She never does." Jeremy chuckled. "Is your mom okay with it?" "Mom says just smile through it." Then another voice. My mother's, off to the side, just out of frame. "Verdell always bends. That's what makes her useful." I hit pause. And then play again. "She always bends. That's what makes her useful." My stomach clenched. It wasn't shock I felt. It was clarity. Like finally being told the answer to a question you'd been asking for years, except you already knew the answer. You just wanted to be wrong. So now we knew. It was never love. It was convenience. I downloaded the clip, saved it in my folder labeled Evidence. Then I backed it up. Twice. Around 6:30 that evening, my phone pinged again. A text from Dad. I didn't know they said those things. "I'm sorry." I stared at the message. For a long time, he'd always been the one to stay out of it, the quiet presence, the buffer. But silence, too, is a choice. Was it too late? Maybe. But at least someone blinked. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. 3 days after the blog post detonated across every screen and group chat in my orbit, the world got unusually quiet. Not peaceful, not resolved, just eerily silent. No phone calls, no texts from family. No, "You okay?" from cousins who used to forward chain emails with Bible verses. The family group chat that once buzzed over baby showers and crockpot recipes had gone dark. Social media feeds that once featured Marzella's brunches and my mother's garden updates were now frozen, like they'd been paused mid-performance. And me? I didn't post a thing. I made coffee. I paid bills. I worked remotely like I always did. I answered emails, watered my plants, and reread the article 3 times. Not because I needed to, every sentence was still branded in my brain, but because the silence afterward felt too much like a trap. Not confrontation, not remorse, just retreat. "This isn't peace," I wrote in my journal that morning. "This is paralysis." And I refused to mistake one for the other. Then below that, the strongest move I made was not backing down. I put down my pen and sat with it for a while. Because it was true. I had pushed against the tide, and now everyone was floating awkwardly in the wake. That afternoon, I walked into the community center where I'd volunteered every Saturday for years. Same time, same room, same coffee pot that brewed too strong. But something in the air felt different. Janet, who used to always greet me with a hug and 3 compliments, barely nodded from behind the sign-in desk. Carmen, who once baked me cookies after my dog died, didn't meet my eye. People were polite. Pleasant, but not warm. I sat through the meeting, listened, participated. But I felt the gap between every word, every glance. They'd seen the article. They'd drawn conclusions. And I realized something brutal. Some people were never on my side. They were just comfortable when I was quiet. Later that evening, I got tagged in a photo from my cousin Leah's engagement party. Not my cousin by blood, Marzella's childhood best friend. I zoomed in, scanning the guests. I wasn't there. Not just physically, my name wasn't on the invite list, not on the table cards, not even in the captions. She'd removed me like a sticker peeled from a notebook. No residue, no notice. You can tell who was invested in your silence, I whispered, when your truth makes them uncomfortable. That night, I was about to shut down my computer when a new message pinged. A direct message on Facebook. From Aunt Olivine. We hadn't spoken in years. She was my mother's sister, always distant, always a bit removed from the family center. I tapped the message, unsure what I'd find. I always knew, she wrote, but I didn't know how to speak up. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. Just that, no elaboration, no explanation. But it hit harder than I expected. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing, "Thank you." Then I added, "I think silence can be forgiven, but complicity can't." She didn't reply. She didn't need to, because sometimes the people you never expected show up with a hand extended, and sometimes that's enough. The next morning, I walked back into the apartment. My apartment. The space was quiet, still untouched from when Marzella last left in a rush. There were half-filled boxes in the corner, a rogue sandal under the coffee table. I moved slowly through the rooms, not to wallow, but to reclaim. I pulled out sticky notes, yellow, neon, the kind I used for project boards, and began labeling what needed fixing. Cabinet hinge, paint touch-up, bathroom grout. It wasn't petty, it was practical, it was movement. Later that day, I sat with Layla, my lawyer, organizing every document, ownership files, property taxes, email exchanges. We started filing for a formal hearing. Legal language that said what my voice already had, "This is mine." I updated my mailing address, changed utilities back into my name, booked a locksmith, again. None of it felt dramatic. It felt like scrubbing a whiteboard that had been written over with someone else's version of me. On my desk, I placed a small framed quote I'd printed off the internet that morning. Healing doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's just a key turning in your own lock. Before bed, I took a photo of the apartment door, my nameplate, my key in the lock. No caption. I posted it. A few likes. A handful of comments. But it wasn't for attention. It was a digital receipt. A timestamp on a moment of truth. And then, just before midnight, my phone buzzed. Family group chat. 17 unread messages. I opened it. Mom. You could have handled this better. Marzella. You made us look like monsters. Dad. We tried our best. Hope you're happy. Not one word of apology. Just wounded ego dressed in concern. They didn't see a daughter who'd been robbed. They saw a spotlight they couldn't control. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But then one more message came through. From my cousin Darren. I think it's time we talked face to face. I have something to show you. And I knew this wasn't over. I met Darren at a cafe tucked into a quiet corner of North Park, the kind of place where people wore beanies in August and ordered pour-over coffee with too many modifiers. It was neutral territory, far enough from both of our family clusters that no one else would stumble in by accident. He was already seated when I arrived, a manila folder on the table between his coffee and a half-eaten scone. His eyes met mine with the nervous guilt of someone who knows he waited too long to do the right thing. I didn't want to be involved, he said, before I could even sit down. But you deserve to see this. He pushed the folder toward me. I opened it slowly, each page heavier than the last. Printouts of emails, thread after thread, between my parents and a private attorney. Subject lines like property transfer logistics, trust structuring for clarity, and one that made my throat tighten. She'll stay quiet like always. Phrases jumped out. Best to finalize before wedding weekend. Include Jeremy's name once established. She won't contest. She never has. A spreadsheet titled Asset Redelegation listed the condo, my original savings account, even a note referencing my old car that I'd sold years ago, apparently considered family circulation. I looked up at Darren. Why now? He exhaled through his nose, rubbing the back of his neck. Because I saw the clip. The one from the wedding, backstage. I heard what they said about you. I couldn't pretend anymore. I nodded once. Words felt too small for the fury rising in my chest, and too big for the restraint I needed to keep from burning the folder on the table out of rage. Later that afternoon, I handed the entire folder to Layla. She flipped through the pages like she was reading a thriller. When she reached the line, "She won't contest, she never has," she sat back and smiled. "This changes everything. This isn't a mistake. This is intent." She explained how these emails proved premeditated fraud, clear as day. Not just manipulation, legal deceit. They hadn't stumbled into a bad decision. They planned a theft. Layla leaned forward. "We're not just defending now. We're pressing forward." She drafted an emergency injunction that afternoon. It would halt all transactions or legal changes to the condo until our court date. No further manipulation. No new filings. No backroom deals. She looked at me as she slid the document across the desk. "They've assumed for a long time that you'd fold, that you'd smile through betrayal. Let them read the words 'under investigation' for once." I took the paper and held it like it was a baton passed in a race I never agreed to run. "Let's file." By the next morning, the legal courier had delivered the injunction to both my parents' address and Marzella's. According to Layla, both were signed for, witnessed even, by the neighbors on each side. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. Was that necessary? I stared at the text. The same man who had toasted to giving away my apartment like it was a wedding favor was now asking about necessity. I typed back 2 words. Absolutely was. Then I printed the notice and pinned it to my fridge with a magnet that read, "Do no harm, but take no nonsense." I opened my laptop and refreshed the blog that had broken the story. A new update was live. Title: Legal Action Update, The Price of Erasure. It detailed the injunction, the history, and included a brief legal commentary from an anonymous source that confirmed, "This appears to be a clear-cut case of fraudulent property transfer." The comments poured in. She stood her ground. Finally, someone calling it out. Rooting for her. She's a damn blueprint. I leaned back in my chair, the kind of full-body exhale that feels like letting out a scream you didn't know you'd swallowed. 2 new messages blinked in my inbox, one from my boss, "Took guts, well done." Another from my property manager, "We've updated the records, you're listed solo again. We made sure of it." I let the tears come this time. Quiet, cleansing. Not because I was weak, but because something had finally been returned to me that had been taken so many times before. Recognition. That afternoon, I reviewed the latest set of legal forms with Layla. As we flipped through the pages, everything was in order. Every date, every filing, every statement. All that was missing was one final thing: my signature. I picked up the pen, the same hand they'd mimicked, the same lines they'd stolen. I signed slowly, letter by letter, then whispered, "Not giving anything away this time." I filed the papers, slid the envelope into my briefcase, and walked back to my apartment. As I turned the corner of the hallway, I saw a figure standing at my door. Marzella. Her eyes were red, a crumpled letter in her hand. She looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup, no jewelry, hair tied back. "I came to explain," she said. I opened the door, stepped inside, and stood in the threshold. "This time," I said quietly, "you'll listen first." Marzella showed up without warning. Again, no knock, no heads up, just a buzz at the door and her reflection in the peephole, holding a white envelope like it weighed more than it should. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. She didn't look smug this time. She looked tired. Her face was blotchy, her hair tied in a loose bun, mascara barely hanging on beneath her lashes. She extended the envelope toward me without a word. I didn't reach for it. "I never expected you to fight back like this," she said. Her voice cracked a little at the edges, but not from sadness, from disbelief, as if her version of me, quiet, obedient, background Verdell, had short-circuited and been replaced. I stepped back just enough for her to enter. She walked in cautiously, like a tenant returning to a place she'd illegally sublet. I went to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of tea, and set one down in front of her, but I didn't sit. She placed the envelope on the coffee table. "It's not everything," she said, "but it's something." I opened it once she left. Inside was a letter, handwritten in her overly rounded cursive, the kind she used on thank you cards and party labels. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. She started with memories, school awards I never got credit for, vacations where she always had the front seat, birthday dinners where I was the one holding the cake for her to blow out. She wrote, "You were always the one who worked harder. I just learned how to smile better." It ended with, "You didn't imagine any of it. You were erased, and I let it happen." I read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer under my sink, next to old warranties and batteries I never remembered to buy. It didn't make me feel better, but it made things clear. "It wasn't in my head," I whispered aloud. She knew. She just counted on me staying small. I stood at my window for a long time, watching the city lights blur into evening. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't closure. But it was acknowledgement. And that was more than I'd ever gotten from any of them. Days passed. No text from Mom. No letter. No voicemail with even a whisper of regret. The silence didn't hurt this time. It confirmed what I'd known for a long time, that the love I'd been craving from her had always come with a condition. Don't challenge the hierarchy. Don't ask for space. On a Wednesday morning, I found myself walking past the old house on Ashmore Street, the one I grew up in. The lawn was manicured, the blinds half drawn. Everything looked the same. I paused at the gate, but didn't go in. I stood there long enough to remember the time I sat on those front steps for hours after school with a science trophy in my lap, waiting for someone to notice. No one ever did. Now, I turned away on my own terms. "Forgiveness doesn't require access," I said quietly. "Closure doesn't require permission." Later that evening, my father called. His voice was steady, but different, measured. Less like someone bracing to mediate and more like a man finally letting go of pretense. "We haven't talked," he said. "I noticed." He paused. "I was wrong. I thought you'd just take it, that you'd roll with it like always." "You weren't wrong," I said. "I used to. But that girl doesn't live here anymore." We didn't talk long. No lectures, no attempts to soften the edges, just honesty, something we'd never tried before. We didn't make plans to meet. That was enough. That night, I returned to the last box in my closet, the one I hadn't opened since I'd first moved in. It sat like a sealed time capsule of who I was before all this started. Inside was a single item, a card, from my boss, the day he handed me the keys to this place. I opened it again for the first time in months. "You've earned more than a title. You've earned a place." I hung it above my desk. I didn't put up family photos. Not anymore. The wall above my couch was lined with plants and framed blueprints, my sketches from before the renovations. Lines and layouts I had once studied late into the night, dreaming of where I'd put my books, my desk, my coffee machine. Dreams they had tried to repurpose. I turned on the lamp beside the card, letting its light fill the corner of the room. It felt like breathing. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. Thick envelope, official seal. I opened it carefully and scanned the first few lines. The court had scheduled the final hearing. Date, 2 weeks from now. I stood in the kitchen, tea in hand, eyes resting on the line that gave me pause. Final title confirmation hearing, plaintiff, Verdell Evans. I smiled. Not the kind that hides pain, the kind that knows what's coming. I whispered, "Let's close this the right way." The courthouse smelled like cold air and polished wood. I arrived early, 15 minutes before the hearing time, though I'd been dressed and ready an hour before that. Layla, my lawyer, had told me to bring every document in triplicate. I did, neatly packed in a navy accordion folder, edges aligned, color-coded tabs. I wore the blazer I'd kept hidden in the back of my closet, the one I bought after my first promotion, back when I believed professional armor could shield you from personal betrayal. Today, I wasn't wearing it to impress. I wore it to finish. At 9:01, the courtroom door opened and the clerk called the case. Evans versus Evans. I stood. Marzella and Liana arrived together, 10 minutes late, escorted by a lawyer in a gray suit with a folder thinner than mine. My father wasn't there. I hadn't expected him to be. The judge took the bench, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses and a voice like gravel and glass. She opened the file, skimmed through the summary, and looked up at Layla. Layla stood. Your Honor, we're not here to debate who owns a condo. We're here because a woman had her life rewritten, because her silence was mistaken for surrender, because her family treated her success like a communal bank account. This is not about property. This is about ownership of truth. Then she laid out the documents, methodically, confidently, the deed in my name. The email threads between my parents and their attorney, including the line, "She won't contest, she never has." The video from the wedding reception, where Marzella told her new husband, "Just smile through it, she won't fight us." There was a pause. The judge turned toward the other side. Counselor? Their lawyer stood. We believe the matter was a miscommunication, an attempt at family consolidation of assets, not intentional fraud. The judge's eyes narrowed. Then why is her signature forged? She asked. Silence. Layla handed over the handwriting analysis. Another pause. You signed over something that was never yours to give, the judge said. And that was it. The gavel didn't slam dramatically. The room didn't gasp. But the words landed like thunder in my chest. Verdict. Full legal ownership returned to me. Injunction against any future claim by my family. Final, binding. I exhaled. Liana whispered something into Marzella's ear. Marzella kept her eyes down. Neither looked at me. My father, it turned out, had been in the hallway the whole time. As I walked out of the courtroom, I caught him through the glass. He didn't come in, but he did mouth 2 words. I'm sorry. I nodded. Once. No smile. No wave. Just enough to say, I saw you. That's all. Let them feel the silence I lived in for decades, I thought, as I walked past them all, past the steps I'd climbed alone, past the system I had feared would not believe me. Back at the apartment, the sun cut through the windows and painted golden streaks across the floor. The silence there felt different, not hollow, but earned. I opened the last box they had left behind. It was light, just a few items. A scented candle, half used, a framed photo of our family at a beach trip 15 years ago. Me and Marzella in the foreground, arms linked, except someone had scratched out my face with blue ink. Childishly, deliberately, I didn't flinch. I took the frame, walked down the hall, and dropped it in the trash chute. No speech, no symbolic gestures, just disposal. That night, I changed the locks. Again. Not out of fear, but as ritual. No one gets a key they didn't earn. 2 days later, I hosted a dinner. Not a party, just a gathering of people who'd shown up when I needed air. Mariah flew in from Denver. Angela from the building brought a homemade cobbler. Darren came, quieter than usual, but he brought flowers and took his shoes off at the door without being asked. We ate, we talked, we laughed in that unforced, easy kind of way. At one point, Mariah looked around and said, "It feels like this place breathes again." I smiled, placed my hand on the wall behind me. That's because it's mine now, fully, not just on paper, in spirit. After they left, I stood at my desk and replaced the card my boss had given me with a new print I had framed the day before. It read, "Built without them." The next morning, I logged into the family group chat for the last time. No one had posted since the verdict. The top banner still read, "Evans family," like nothing had changed. I typed a single line. "I wish you well," from far away. Then I left the chat. Then I blocked them all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop answering the door. A few weeks passed. One afternoon, I opened the mailbox and found a plain white envelope. No return address, no markings. Inside, a single check, $1,000. Signed, anonymous, but not uninformed.